Okay, welcome to the Kick-Ass Midlife Method podcast. And I'm joined by women from the Kick-Ass community, and we are talking about how to master your macros. So, the Midlife Women's Guide to Strength, Health, and Sustainable Results. So, macronutrients, I always think it's worth just actually going over what they actually are because sometimes we think we know what they are and we're not quite sure. It simply is the term given for the nutrients, the major nutrients that make up our diet: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. So each are essential for our diet. We shouldn't be cutting out any one of them, despite the diet information that we might have been brought up on. And they together in balance really help your overall health and well-being. So the reason I'm particularly doing this podcast this evening is because I'm looking at women's nutritional intake every single week. And what I often see still is kind of misinformation about, well, it displays the fact that we've brought up in an era where we've been through the low fat diet, the low carb stuff, the keto, the Atkins, and not surprisingly, there's still a bit of that going around in people's heads. So it can get a bit confusing. And when you're tracking your macros, you've got to remember that not all macros are created equal. So carbohydrates, they're your primary energy source for your brain, muscles, and nervous system. This is often one of the ones I hear women say, oh, I've got to avoid carbohydrates. It was a big thing in the 2000s about, low carb stuff. So carbohydrates include sugars, starches, fiber. They're in pretty much everything except protein. So rice, pasta, bread, vegetables, fruit, oats, they're in everything. And we really need them. We need them for our energy. So often I can come across women saying, I'm really exhausted. I've got terrible hormonal menopause symptoms. I've just got no energy. I'm totally fatigued. And yes, there are potentially some hormone issues going on there, but also it's because lots of women aren't eating enough carbohydrates. So you're trying to exist on no carbohydrates, which are there for a reason. But carbohydrates can be broken into simple and complex carbs. So, and this is where it's really important to understand, unless you're in a performance area where you're training for something specific, like a race of some kind, then you really need to be understanding the difference between simple and complex carbohydrates. So simple carbohydrates are quickly broken down. You get this rapid energy spike and then a crash, which is when that time when you start feeling really tired again. So sugar, white bread and wraps. I should say in that not whole wheat breads are diet, but brown breads, for instance. If you go for brown bread and you think, I'm doing really well, a lot of them can have caramel in them and it colours the flour. So brown bread, not whole wheat. Brown bread, sometimes do watch out for that in the ingredients. Pastries, obviously sugary cereals, and sugary cereals include things like bran flakes. It includes granola. It includes some of the mueslis as well. Sweets and chocolate, obviously, fruit juice and some fruits. We'll go on to that a little bit later. Sodas, Coke and stuff like that. White rice and pasta, honey in excess. So the reason why those simple carbohydrates are not great for us in midlife is they spike the blood sugar, leads to crashes, mood swings, and fatigue. But it also triggers that insulin release. So we become insulin resistant, or can do, particularly post-menopause. And that's why when you're constantly feeding the body fast release, quick release carbohydrates, then that can often contribute to an increase and accumulation of belly fat. And obviously increases cravings because you have this big boost of energy, you feel great, and then literally half an hour later you feel absolutely knackered again. And therefore you think, oh, I need some more food. I'm going to have something else because I'm really tired. And actually it's just that your glucose has gone through the roof and then it's crashed again. And then your complex, so slow digesting, steady energy keeps you full for longer. Oats, sweet potato, quinoa. Let me just let one person in. Quinoa, lentils, chickpeas, whole grain bread, pasta, veg, stoned fruits and berries, those kind of things are all slower release carbohydrates. So your impact in all life stages, actually, not just midlife, it balances your blood sugar, reduces cravings, obviously, because you're balancing the blood sugar. That can help improve your energy and therefore, obviously, your mood. If you're not tired, you don't feel things don't get on top of you as much, obviously. Supports hormone regulation, especially with fiber and B vitamins, and it boosts your metabolism because you're actually eating. So there's something around your thermogenesis as you're digesting food that actually boosts your metabolism. So if you're trying to decrease and not eating enough, actually you're also slowing your metabolism down from that perspective. Helps maintain lean muscle when paired with protein, means you actually have the energy to do your workouts. So it's another really important fact, and reduces inflammation, which is obviously key during hormonal transition. So why this matters in midlife, as I'm sure you all know, estrogen drops, progesterone and testosterone as well in there, and that increases your insulin resistant muscle mass, naturally declines, metabolism slows, blood sugar becomes harder to regulate. So complex carbohydrates in particular are the kind of carbohydrates you want to go for because they support your hormone health, your energy and metabolism, and therefore make weight management, especially accumulation of fat in those areas around the belly, which particularly cause concern at this time of life, they help with that. Whereas if you're constantly feeding these like fast release, simple carbohydrates, you're constantly fueling that inflammatory response, and potentially you've got nowhere for that energy to go because you're not using it, you're sitting it down, and then it's going to get accumulated in the belly in particular. And then going on to this, because someone asked me about this today, because I use GI quite often. So GI stands for glycemic index. So it's a scientifically ranked system that rates your carbohydrates and how quickly they release blood sugar. So you can look it up and find a whole list of different foods and their specific GI index scale of 0 to 100. 100 obviously is the highest. Low GI is considered under 55, medium 56 to 69, and high is 6 over 70. So just thought I'd pull out like some little examples of this just to show you the difference. So you can see, think of some, so banana, for instance, is medium and apple's low. Strawberries are really low. Tortilla wrap, depending on what kind of type it is, low to medium. Granola, you can see, is very high. Bran flakes, very high. So some of those kind of cereals that you just buy off the shelf can often have lots of hidden sugars in them, so be careful of that. Hummus is low, rice crackers is very high, sourdough bread, low to medium, and then you can see tofu tempeh, paneer, cottage cheese, all very low. Yeah, broccoli, green veg tends to be all really low. White potato you can see is quite high. So it's just like worth having a little look at that. Medium chocolate, so chocolate, sugar added chocolate like Cadbury's is medium actually. Dark chocolate is quite low. Always worried about putting chocolate on there because people just be like, ah, and then protein. So your second macro, of which you know we've done quite a lot to talk about protein a lot, absolutely essential. You can't do without protein. Our bodies don't produce it. We really need it through our diet to rebuild and maintain our muscles, skin, hair, nails, bones. They're made of 9 amino acids. Made of amino acids, 9 of which your body can't produce on its own. So you've got to have them. Animal protein, obviously, meat, dairy, eggs, plant proteins, beans, nuts, seeds, and tofu. Interestingly, animal protein contains all 9 essential amino acids, while plant sources don't. So that's sometimes why some of those protein shakes really come into play, particularly if you're vegan or veggie. Vegan, sorry, because you can have dairy and eggs if you're veggie. So how much protein? Obviously, if you're in the kick-ass community, you'll have your protein, your exact protein set for you. But it really depends on your age, how much you move, how much you're lifting, your health and your goals. So generally, if you look at Dr. Stacey Sims, who might be an interesting read for some of you, she recommends 1.7 to 2.4 grams per kilo of body weight. At first, if you're not, and that's not from a protein focused diet, a protein concentration diet. It's a just protein consciousness. So actually, most women don't eat enough protein in general, not for performance, not for anything else, just for general living. The protein is really low. So which protein is best? Obviously, the leaner the source of protein with less saturated fat and without processing is the best source of protein for you. I just thought I'd add this in here because we have got some vegan people in the community, and I know that from a vegan point of view, it can be very difficult. And it's also interesting just for everyone else's point of view as well, because I see this often. I see things like peanut butter and nuts put in here, and you can see 2 tablespoons is only 8 grams of protein. So you have to be really careful with things like nut butters because they're highly calorific compared to the actual amount of protein you get for them. So if you're relying on nut butters for your protein content in order to get like 8, 16, 16, 24, 30. So say you got 30 grams and we're aiming for like 30 grams per meal, that would be, 800 calories for that. So be very careful about your nut butters. Nutritional yeast can be quite a good one, sprinkled in things. And as you can see, temper does really well. Edamame also. Edamame beans are really good as like a snack. You can put them in your stews, you put them in your salads. They're quite good. I have them with chili and salt, so they can be quite a nice thing to do. So I just thought I'd add that in there. Oops. And then your fats. So again, your fats are really essential. And again, because of the whole low fats movement when we were younger, and if you go to the supermarkets now, it's hilarious how all of the dairy aisle now has been replaced from low fat. You don't really see too many low fat now with protein added products in the dairy section. It's completely changed. And I'm sure I've said things before about protein added foods, but concentrating on the fats. So they're really essential. We need them for our cell function, temperature regulation, absorption. So they, without them, we can't make certain vitamins. Bioavailability is affected. So we need that to order to get those vitamins. The distinction is between saturated fats and unsaturated fats. So saturated fats solid at room temperature is a good way of thinking about it. Found in butter, fatty cuts of meat. So when you get like a meat and it's got like that massive marble or big rind of fat on it, obviously that's your saturated fats. Tend to find it in beef a lot, and unsaturated fats, oils, avocados, nuts, and seeds. But again, also be aware, unsaturated fats, healthy fats are all good, but avocados, olive oil, also highly calorific. So it's about balance. It's just about empowering yourself with the knowledge. If you're tracking, look at it. Someone, I don't know whether they're on this call today, had an avocado and was obviously quite shocked that it was 370 calories. And that was just a side of her lunch. So it's really about being aware that whilst these things are healthy, everything in moderation. So just to kind of break it down, I thought I'd show you a case study example. So say we're looking at a woman of 73 kilos, not much exercise. So she needs to aim for about 120 grams of protein based on her size, but she's not exercising much, so that's still on the lower end of things. So this is why the protein and your intake varies completely from person to person. You can never say, oh, if somebody says I'm having that calories and I've lost all that weight, you can't think, right, well, I'm going to have to do that too, and I'm going to have that amount of protein too, because your body's a completely different size. You've got completely different goals. These got to be personalized to you. But let's take this 73 kilo woman, 120 grams of protein. So maybe let's say we're aiming for 40 grams per meal. Obviously, breakfast is quite difficult, but just as an example, you can see that in your head, you might think, and it's not unhealthy. No, they're not unhealthy. Yogurt with peanut, with a nut butter, fruit and honey. It's not unhealthy, but you can see that's still only getting you in at 22.4 grams of protein, and it's 480 calories. You've got granola, yogurt, and fruit, which lots of people do think is really healthy, but it's quite full of simple carbohydrates, fast release sugars. You're getting only 8 grams, just 9 grams of protein, 330 calories. So, therefore, even though you might be having that as your breakfast, suddenly you've probably got to fit in a whole another meal somewhere to make up that protein. And then you look at something like eggs with salmon, 300 calories, and that's 38 grams of protein. So you can see it's all like it's about balancing and thinking, where do I get all of my three macros in a really macronutrient dense way that's going to keep me full, going to energize me, and it's going to hit all the goals that I kind of need. And then we'll go on to like a lunch option. I see this one a lot. I see falafel going on quite a lot. Falafel salad, hummus, wrap. I've added pop chips because I sometimes see chips going on crisps. Sorry, not American. Um, so you can see tablespoon of hummus, and I'm being generous there because actually I think hummus is one of those things that's quite easy to have a little bit more than a tablespoon and not realize that it's a little bit more than that. Falafel, there's two. I base that on Lidl or Aldi, I think, and a wrap, pop chips. You've got 548 calories, still only 14 grams of protein. So it's not very much. And again, you're like 26 grams short of your protein content that you need. So therefore, where you're going to find that, you're going to have another meal somehow, and then you're going to add to your total overall energy intake. Tuna and avocado salad, so big tin of tuna, not the little ones. Chickpeas, egg, 320 calories, 37 grams of protein. So you can see how it starts to kind of weigh up. Um, I haven't quite added that all up, or have I? Um, yeah, I have added all that up. So like 18, this quinoa, tin of sardines, edamame beans. What's that? 18. Yeah, over 40 and quite low in your overall nutritional intake, but you're hitting all your macros. Get really good protein, really good carbohydrates. I'd probably add some like broccoli to that because it's a volumizing food, hardly got anything in it. And then you've got your energy. You're feeling full for longer because protein takes longer for the body to digest, which is why it keeps you full for longer. And you've got your healthy fats. So the key takeaways for you to take away from this. Um, Eating sufficient protein, vital. It's not a kind of an optional thing. If you want to maintain your muscle for longevity and for your metabolism, it's essential with exercise. And the quality of your macros really matter. So it's not about cutting any of the macros out. You've got to have all three. But around the carbohydrates, it's really important to start thinking about the quality of your carbohydrates, opting for low or medium glycemic index foods, and tuning in to like maybe when you're tracking and you go back and reflect over the week and you think, God, that day I was really tired. I was really tired. If you look back at your day, look and think, oh, actually, was it because I had quite a few fast release things? Has it got something to do with that? It might be just that you were tired, fair enough. But just it's about tracking and reflecting and then taking action on that reflection. So this is one of the things I see the most often is quite simple carbohydrates thrown in there, and that is you think you're hitting all your macros because your a tracker doesn't distinguish between your kind of fast and simple and complex carbohydrates. So it's looking at that in particular. Fat is not the enemy. So I've got a post coming out about that because in a lot of people's heads, I still think people think that fat converts to fat, that you eat fat and it converts to fat. Fat, carbohydrates, and protein all convert to fat if you eat too many of them. Fat doesn't make fat just by itself. All three macros, if you eat too many of them, are stored as fat. You obviously do want to be thinking about your saturated fats compared to your unsaturated fats in terms of your heart health. And then protein, obviously, as I said, keeps you feeling full for longer and is absolutely essential for muscle maintenance and growth and to keep you full for longer. So thanks for joining, and I hope that's provided some insights. A lot of it, those kind of things, are things we think we know and things that we are conscious that we know, but sometimes in the general rush of things, we forget, particularly I think around the quality of your macros. So has anyone got any questions or want to come back on any of those topics or anything else? Because I definitely know that there are people doing this kind of thing. So just come on with a question. And I've got something in here. See some vegetarian that combine is similar to the salmon. A vegan protein either add to carbs or fat. So the other thing actually I would like to say about that is that on the when you see your macro content, you do want to try and hit your protein, but say you are over on your fats and they're healthy fats and less on your carbohydrates. It doesn't actually matter too much as long as you're still hitting your overall nutritional intake. So, for instance, I've done another meeting about this in the past. Some people naturally like fattier foods, some people naturally like more carbohydrate dense foods. So, actually, as long as you're hitting your overall nutritional intake and your protein, those two things, it doesn't really matter if your carbohydrates are a little bit over what you've been set or your fats are over what's been set, as long as you're actually hitting your overall nutritional intake. And I know that's a bit weird, hard to get your head around because you think, well, fat's bad for me. Healthy fats are not bad for you. Healthy fats have got 9 calories per gram compared to carbohydrates and fat. So that's why fat has been given a bad rap. 9 calories, sorry, that's what I said, 9 calories. So that's why fats have been given a bad rap because they contain more energy than other sources. So, if someone's trying to cut, then they immediately think, well, that's got more calories, I'll cut that. When actually, say you particularly quite like oily fish and olives oils and stuff like that, and actually you're hitting everything else right, then it doesn't matter. Go higher fat, less carbohydrates, but still make sure you hit your protein. I don't know whether that helps. I'll definitely put that in the chat. So should we choose fat-free options? No, don't choose fat-free options because fat-free, again, it's just that the fat version has slightly more calories, but actually what you benefit from in terms of a full fat is it'll keep you feeling fuller for longer. And what tends to happen when things are made low fat is that they add some sugars to make it more palatable. So what you're losing in fat, you're adding in sugar. The one exception to that is Farge, Greek strained fat-free yogurt. Because of the way it's strained, it has more protein in than the fat version by significant amounts. So that's the one exception to the rule. But otherwise, there's no reason to have low fat. I eat a lot of frozen fruit. No, frozen fruit, frozen veg is all really good. Doesn't make any difference at all. So, if you're someone who struggles like cutting things up to make for your dinner, like just get bags of frozen stuff already cut. Doesn't matter if that means that you eat more fresh food because it makes it quicker. Do that. I use frozen fruit in all my smoothies rather than have them fresh because they keep for longer and it's easier. Claudia, you had a question. Do you want to come on and ask?
Yeah, I was just wondering about the GI index and whether we should be looking a bit more closely at that within our foods, because I was quite surprised with some of the foods having higher GI, and also whether there's somewhere that you would recommend a list of
Well,
foods.
there will be a list online. So obviously, the more you educate yourself, the more empowered you are. But it all depends whether you've got that much time. I mean, obviously, I'm always feeding back on your nutritional intake. So part of what I do on that is obviously a learning process because you're not gonna get it right, which is why I coach people for 6 months to a year because, you know, we've spent 35, 40 odd years getting misinformed about what we should be eating. And so part of my feedback is around that. But obviously, if you've got the time to download the GI, then yeah, then do it because it's only going to help.
Yeah, there are just certain foods that I'm wondering whether I'm sort of eating them and I should find alternatives maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Which foods are you talking about?
halloumi. I love halloumi.
Halloumi would is because it's a protein,
Uh,
so I wouldn't
that's all
I
right.
wouldn't halloumi
Okay.
would be okay.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, halloumi is really nice. It's probably, I mean, what you want to look at in terms of halloumi is you probably need to add to that because the protein level is probably not that high. So, like one way of
Yeah.
doing that is you could, again, you'd have to check the exact, but I would sprinkle like roast some pine nuts, sprinkle some pine nuts in there because then it adds a little bit
Okay.
of texture. You could do something like that, or have
Cool.
halloumi and egg. I know that sounds weird, but I'm in France at the moment. They love a bit of cheese and egg in their salads.
That's good. Good
That's
to
always a quick way of doing it as well.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful.
Well, thanks for joining. I hope some of you found that useful. Even if with these meetings, even if like one little thing, just sometimes it's just like one little thing that will hit home that will hopefully make a difference. So thanks for joining.